Tonight on the Donlon Report, don't mess with mom. That's one of the takeaways after voters cast ballots in Virginia. We're going to explain how women helped swing the governor's race for the Republican Glenn Youngkin. Policing also on the ballot across the country. Minneapolis voted to keep its police department, but more oversight is coming to departments in other cities across the country. What that means for law enforcement and crime. Plus, listen to this.
If you're a one-issue voter and tax rate is your issue, either a family or a business, if that's the only basis upon which you're going to make a decision, we're probably not your state.
Well, that might be why Governor Phil Murphy is in the fight of his political life in New Jersey. That race still too close to call tonight, a full day after the election. A surprise to say the least. Top tax crusader, Grover Norquist will join us with more on that. And NFL MVP Aaron Rodgers is out after testing positive for COVID, but did the Green Bay Packers superstar lie about his vaccination status? I'll speak with a former Chicago Bear about taking down Rodgers. A lot to get to tonight. It's great to have you with us. Live from our Chicago studios, the Donlon Report starts right now. Good evening. There are few things more ferocious than a mama bear defending her cubs, and that's apparently true in politics as well. That is the pulse of America tonight. It was a devastating night for Democrats, defined by women, their votes, and the issue of education. Take a look at this. In Virginia, 1 year ago, 50% of white women voted for President Biden versus 49% for President Trump, helping to put Biden in the White House. Now, fast forward to last night, a whopping 15-point swing for the GOP. 57% of white women went for Republican Glenn Youngkin, 43% for the Democrat Terry McAuliffe. In fact, maybe we should have seen it coming. Heading into the election, parents of school-aged children, according to a poll, moved overwhelmingly to Glenn Youngkin, giving him a double-digit edge in that group and changing the race. The main issue, as mentioned, education and schools. The turning point, as we've said a number of times on this broadcast, might have been this.
I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision.
You vetoed it.
So, yeah, I stopped the bill that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
So here's how much that statement cost McAuliffe. When asked in exit polling how much say should parents have in their child's curriculum, 84% of voters responded either a lot or some. 84%. Glenn Youngkin jumped on that and rode the education issue and suburban moms to victory last night. And he did so without the help of Donald Trump. He didn't even mention his name. And that's provided a roadmap for moderate Republicans in tough races going forward. As for the person currently in the White House, he was on Air Force One while all this was going on last night. When President Biden landed and got back to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, he returned to an aggressive agenda in limbo. The president's approval level is at an all-time low. He won Virginia by 10 points just a year ago, making Youngkin's win even more impressive. Mr. Biden needs to look no further, perhaps, than his own vice president for what the results in Virginia might mean.
What happens in Virginia will in large part determine what happens in 2022, 2024, and on.
So we often say on this broadcast, politics is the new national sport. So much so, you might have missed the fact that the Atlanta Braves won the World Series last night. What were you watching? Unless you lived in Houston or Atlanta, maybe. Food for thought as we begin tonight, once again with our colleague and NewsNation host, Leland Vittert. He is in Washington, had a late night last night, Leland, and I guess as we talked about maybe handicapping this thing yesterday, we knew it was going to be close, and the polls actually were able to bear that out last night. And as we discussed here, suburban women appear to have carried this for Youngkin and parents overall.
Yeah, exactly. When we talked 24 hours ago, we told you to watch Loudoun County, Virginia, and that was a county that Biden won 2-1 12 months ago. Glenn Youngkin was able to close that gap significantly, only lost it by about 10 points. What happened in Loudoun County? That was ground zero for the school board debates about critical race theory, the school board debates as it came to transgender bathrooms. There was a sexual assault in one of the schools of a young woman by a transgender student, allegedly. And that's also where the teachers' unions focused a lot of their energy. Loudoun County, Virginia. Who's there? Wealthy suburbanites. What do moms normally think about when they think about their kids? They think about lunches, they think about soccer practice. They don't normally think about politics. Because of the soundbite you played from Terry McAuliffe, it forced moms to start thinking about politics when they thought about their kids, and thinking about your kids and your family will always trump everything else, no pun intended, that you may or may not believe. And as we found out from the exit polling, there was a plurality, probably a majority of parents who voted on this singular issue about their children that Glenn Youngkin was able to make the #1 issue in this election.
Leland, let's give you some visual background for what you're talking about here in Loudoun County, because we looked it up, and you mentioned it's a very blue area, and it's still, as a result, even though McAuliffe did win Loudoun County, considered a win for Youngkin. We knew yesterday that as Loudoun County went, wasn't going to determine the outcome, but nonetheless, Youngkin did much better. The thought, though, Leland, was that maybe these northern suburbs in Virginia might be able to carry the day for McAuliffe. That didn't happen either.
Right, and Team McAuliffe yesterday afternoon got really excited because they said the turnout in those northern Virginia suburbs, the suburbs around Richmond, was really high. What they didn't realize was a lot of that was independent and even some Democratic voters who, yes, were energized, yes, were enthused. They were not enthused by Terry McAuliffe saying a vote for Youngkin is a vote for another Trump. They were enthused and energized because they believed they were protecting their children. Suburban women who flipped from voting for Biden to voting for Terry McAuliffe, namely white women, a lot of them college educated, is what made the difference in this race. And you think about it, on one hand, it was about the issue of kids and mandates, vaccine mandates, mask mandates, critical race theory, what was being taught in schools, whether or not parents should be able to have a say about what happens in schools. And the other part that Glenn Youngkin talked about significantly was vaccine mandates. Well, what do you have in Northern Virginia? You've got a lot of federal contractors in Northern Virginia, and there's big federal contractors who are talking about losing parts of their workforce because of the vaccine mandate. You can imagine there's a lot of suburban mothers who two things were threatened. Their children's freedom was threatened when it comes to what they were going to learn and their ability to have an influence on their kids' schooling, and their husbands' jobs were threatened, or at least possibly threatened, over vaccine mandates. That is a powerful motivator over any other kind of issues that would bring people to the polls.
The other thing we learned here, Leland, I would guess, is that Democrats can't just use Trump against a Republican candidate, as they did successfully in California with Larry Elder, but tried to do it in Virginia, and it didn't work. It didn't stick to him.
Well, it didn't stick because Glenn Youngkin didn't play into the theme, right? Larry Elder would talk about Donald Trump. Glenn Youngkin will not say the word Donald Trump. I listened to his victory speech at 1 o'clock in the morning. He didn't slip then. First-time candidate, long-time businessman, Glenn Youngkin was extraordinarily disciplined in how he walked the tightrope. And it's important to remember that not only did he draw over a lot of suburban women that we talked about, and those who were quite offended by the craziness, if you will, of the MAGA personality and the MAGA rhetoric, he also outdid President Trump in the red counties, the deep red counties in southwestern Virginia. He also beat President Trump's numbers by 5 or 10 points there. So somehow he managed to energize the MAGA crowd without embracing President Trump.
Right.
That's a playbook a lot of Republicans are studying right now.
No doubt. Leland Vittert, live for us in Washington, D.C. We'll see you at the top of the hour with On Balance. Thanks, Leland. So is this the roadmap now for Republicans, and where exactly are Democrats headed? Let's ask Lara Fink, Democratic strategist and founder of Revel Communications, and Kevin Sheridan, former RNC spokesman and founding partner of Protein Public Affairs. Kevin, let's start with you. I don't know, are we making too much of this Trump stuff? Because it seems like from the outside, Youngkin just ran a pretty impressive campaign and proved that you can win without embracing him.
Well, Terry McAuliffe certainly made too much of the Trump stuff. He didn't really have any other message. And as a former governor, he should have been talking about widening 66, reopening all the schools, getting everybody back to work, and running on his previous record and what he was going to do in a positive, optimistic way moving forward. He didn't do that. He ran ads. I'm in D.C. I was getting all the ads here. They were almost 100% about Trump. So congratulations, you ran down the numbers of Donald Trump, but you were running against Glenn Youngkin, who's not Donald Trump, no matter how hard he tried to make him. So he really just missed on the message. It was great timing for Youngkin. Terry McAuliffe stepped in it, obviously, with the comment about the schools, but it really was a gaffe that kind of revealed how he really felt. And he does not believe that teachers should, or that parents should have a say in their education and telling schools what they should be learning.
Well, yeah.
That really revealed itself there.
It showed up in the exit polling as well. Laura, let's get you on something the president said today, because it caught my eye as I was watching his news conference this afternoon. He spoke about Election Day and what happened and why, and here's part of that.
I just think people are at a point, and it's understandable, where there's a whole lot of confusion. Everything from, are you going to ever get COVID under control, to whether or not I'm going to get a tax break that allows me to be able to pay for the needs of my kids and my family. And they're all things that I'm running on, that we'll run on, and I think we'll do fine.
The other thing he said, Laura, that caught my eye was that people want to see us get things done. And I guess the point would be the Democrats were unable to deliver on several of these things they were hoping to before these elections. But if you're a Democrat in a swing state, I'm wondering now, are you going to get a little nervous after seeing what happened last night? And might we see more mansions and cinemas as a result?
Well, there's always panic at the disco after a loss, and today is no exception. I think President Biden is spot on. People hired him to be the get-it-done guy, and he's getting it done a little bit later than expected. And really, that malaise among Democrats, the anger has an energy, and Republican anger creates an environment where they see turnout surging in those rural areas, even without Trump on stage. So Glenn Youngkin benefited from the absence of Trump. You know, Terry McAuliffe tried to paint him as the Trump wolf in a polar fleece, but couldn't successfully do it. So that's the challenge. Now, look, nobody's arguing that Terry McAuliffe didn't make mistakes, but the wind was at Republican backs with that anger and energy, and with those white women specifically in the suburbs moving over. Yeah. There was room for that critical race theory, white identity politics argument, and it helped Republicans.
Kevin, we talked about making too much of Trump. Did we not make enough of Youngkin? Because, I mean, when you looked at him on the trail, he had an energy and sort of an optimism about him, and he's as Laura pointed out, sort of a newcomer, a fresh face, and had never run before.
Yeah, he was the perfect candidate for this moment. He seems like the dad who would show up, at a soccer game and provide donuts for everybody, and he just seems like a very, just a calm and great presence to be around. He's the anti-Trump in that way. He wasn't making wild statements. He wasn't playing to the base, but he still got the base. He got, as you were saying, rural voters showed up for him. So he provides a blueprint that if Donald Trump stays out of the race, and that's a big if, but if he stays out of a race, it provides a Republican candidate with a blueprint for how to win. A
template. Laura, if there's good news for the Democrats, you have a year. What do you do in that time to regroup and try to change the outcome for 22?
Look, it looks like the reconciliation bill is going to pass. We're going to start talking about jobs and kitchen table issues again. Inflation, by virtually every economist's argument, is transitory. Supply chain issues are going to resolve themselves. The timing is off here, and so that puts Democrats in a decent position looking forward. Also, the Republican playbook is out. We know now that Republicans, with a wink and a nod and a little talk about elections being stolen, and make no mistake, Glenn Youngkin made those arguments in those rural areas, that we know what their playbook is going to be, and the minute we start talking about change and getting things done for the American people, we're going to be in good stead.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, because I hadn't heard anyone talk about anything being stolen yet in Virginia or New Jersey. So we have that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. We agree on that. The Democrats aren't fighting that fever.
All right, Lara Fink, Democratic strategist, and Kevin Sheridan, former RNC spokesperson. Thanks to both of you for coming on tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still too close to call in New Jersey. As we mentioned, Governor Phil Murphy paying politically for this comment on taxes.
If you're a one-issue voter and tax rate is your issue, either a family or a business, if that's the only basis upon which you're going to make a decision, we're probably not your state.
Up next, Top tax crusader Grover Norquist joins us as they continue to count votes in New Jersey. We'll keep an eye on that throughout the hour here, and certainly if there are any developments, we will let you know. And don't forget, you can follow us on social media at the Donlon Report on Twitter. The governor's race in New Jersey still too close to call. Incumbent Democratic Governor Phil Murphy and Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli remain in a near dead heat in a state President Biden won by 16 percentage points over President Trump. Key issue in that state, taxes. The Garden State has the highest property taxes in the country, according to the Tax Foundation, and ranks third nationally in combined income and sales taxes, trailing only New York and Connecticut. Murphy is on record saying if taxes are your biggest issues, New Jersey might not be your state.
If you're a one-issue voter and tax rate is your issue, either a family or a business, if that's the only basis upon which you're going to make a decision, we're probably not your state.
For citizens paying one of the highest tax rates in the country, that's a tough sell, even if you're the boss, which technically he is in the state, but he's not the boss in New Jersey. You music fans know what I mean there, and I'm sure Grover Norquist does as well. He's with Americans for Tax Reform. In fact, he's the president. Grover, I'm guessing you're not surprised to see this race as close as it is, considering where you stand on the tax issue.
Well, New Jersey's done everything wrong on taxes for quite some time, but they haven't always been a high tax state. In 1966, they didn't have a sales tax or an income tax. In 1966, they put in a sales tax. 10 years later, they put in an income tax, both in order to get the property taxes down, the politicians said. And as you mentioned at the beginning, they have the highest property taxes in the country and a sales tax and an income tax that are high. They're driving people out of the state. Jack Murphy was allowed to get elected because in the last 30 years, those high taxes have driven a lot of people out of that state with a combined annual income of $44 billion. If everybody just took their salary and showed it as they left the state, that state would be flush with cash if they weren't driving people out by taxing them too much.
You said Jack. I think you meant Phil, but it's okay because I called him Chris.
Yes, Phil.
I called
Phil
him Chris
Murphy,
20 minutes ago. It's all good. But let's play a clip from Bernie Sanders because Murphy brought in the senator on the campaign trail, and here's what the senator said.
I am here because your governor is one of the most progressive, if not the most progressive governor in America.
So I'm not sure that helped, Grover. Maybe he should have brought you in for the tax message instead.
Well, the governor, who the last time he got elected, he won by 14 points. This time it's almost dead even. I mean, that's a 14 percentage point drop in his level of support once people knew what he was doing. He raised taxes on an annualized basis $2.7 billion higher. He raised taxes just about every year. He tried to raise it $4 billion. He only got it up $2.7 billion a year. And then he promised this election cycle, he kind of realized what he'd done wrong. He said, I'll never do it again. We said, would you put that in writing and sign it? He said, oh, no, I won't put it in writing. I'm just going to promise you.
Yeah, this issue and the comment that he made there that we've played a couple of times, as I understand it from people back in New Jersey, it was all over television. It was sort of the foundation of Ciattarelli's campaign, was it not?
It was. Ciattarelli said we're going to reduce taxes, we're going to keep taxes down, and Murphy was committed to higher and higher taxes and more spending, and a great deal of debt. He did a big borrowing, a big debt increase. And he said, by the way, if we ever can't pay this, they had an automatic link to a state property tax, another tax increase that he would put on in order to cover the billions that he borrowed against the future. So
what, Grover, do you think is the fallout for the spending plan? You've heard some of the conversation, I'm guessing, leading up to your shot here. Sure. Are you sleeping any better now? Because I know you're not a big fan of it.
No, we don't need to spend any of that money, and we certainly don't need to raise any of those taxes. All of those taxes will kill jobs, and all the money they're talking about spending goes into welfare. None of it goes into doing things that make Americans more productive or ability to get more jobs. So
even the infrastructure package, Grover?
about a quarter of the infrastructure package has something to do with roads and bridges. But that's giving them a real break. It's actually less than 25%. They do spend a fair amount of money on milkweed plant seeds being put on both sides of highways to attract butterflies, monarch butterflies. That's part of the infrastructure bill. I'm not sure that as your truck goes down and smashes up all the butterflies, that really helps get people to work and back. But that is part of their infrastructure bill. I think that it's possible that the spending bill doesn't happen at all.
Really?
Because, well, the 5 Democrats in the House have said, we're not voting for it unless you actually write it down and get it scored so we know how much it costs. And then everybody takes enough time to read a 2,000-page piece of legislation. We're talking about weeks.
Right.
And the longer we look at it, the worse we find things. Remember that we found them trying to spy on everybody's bank accounts. Well, they took that out temporarily, although one of the Treasury Administration people for Biden said, oh, yeah, we're going to get it back in. So watch out for that to come back in.
Yeah, it feels like it might be pared down even more, depending on what happens. Joe Manchin today said this was a symbol and a signal from the voters that they wanted us to slow down and do this right. I guess it does bring the question up, though, that we asked our panel earlier, Grover. Do you think this might give some Democrats reason to maybe hesitate, pause, and give it a second chance or a second thought on whether they're going to support it?
Yes, I do. And again, it only takes 4 or 5 Democrats in the House to stop it dead. It only takes 1 Democrat in the Senate to stop it cold. So they can either make it down to a smaller amount of money and a smaller level of taxation to where there can be an agreement, or if the progressives keep insisting that everything be put into this package, perhaps nothing passes at all.
All right, Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform President. There's a lot to be done in D.C. We always appreciate having your voice on it. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you.
Minneapolis votes to keep its police force, but what will they do now about rising crime and fewer officers on the streets? We're talking to a local reverend who's taking matters into his own hands, and it's working. And in New York, a law and order candidate will be that city's next mayor. Can Eric Adams mend the relationship between the NYPD and City Hall and bring the Big Apple back? That's all ahead. Cities across America have cast their vote on police reform, and the results are in. Voters have chosen police oversight rather than radical structural change. Specifically in Albany, New York, and Cleveland, Ohio, measures to increase police oversight board authority passed, while more radical reforms, such as completely overhauling the police departments in Minneapolis and Austin, Texas, were rejected. Joining me now for more on this, New Salem Missionary Baptist Church Reverend Jerry McAfee and retired Anne Arundel, Maryland County Police Commander T.J. Smith. Reverend, let's start with you. What's the pulse in your city tonight, a day after this election? What's the word on the streets?
Well, we're just getting back to work and continuing to do what we had started back in May because, you know, whether it passed or failed, we're facing an alarming amount of people shot and people dead. So we're just getting back, continuing to do what we were doing before. Why do you think it failed, Reverend? It was ill-informed. There was no plan in sight. You cannot talk about eradicating the police department or major changes in the police department when you've had 140-some people killed since George Floyd, 800 and some people shot. The majority of those people are African-American, and you did not talk to the African-American community. TJ, let's bring you in. There were some other cities we mentioned, Cleveland and Albany, where voters did support the civilian-led oversight boards, which a number of cities have. Do you think the Minneapolis plan went too far? And what do you think of these oversight committees?
Well, the Reverend just hit the nail on the head. A lot of these plans seem to be just something as a reaction to what took place. And the people who are bearing the brunt of the bullets, of burying their children, aren't being consulted with these things. The people that need the protection from law enforcement aren't being consulted with, what do you want law enforcement to look like, and it isn't fair to them. And of course, again, as we continue these conversations, you're not going to find much disagreement between the activists, between politicians, and even some police that reform is necessary. But to throw the baby out with the bathwater and see people that look like me and look like the Reverend bear the brunt of being buried at this astronomical level in these American cities, and see people that don't look like me, quite frankly, leading the charge to dismantle police departments and remove police from these cities, it's a problem. And it's been rejected in some cities. And I think it's being rejected for a reason, because the people that do have a voice at the ballot box are saying, no, wait a minute, this doesn't work. But civilian oversight in some of these communities is a step in the right direction to make sure that there are some checks and balances to hold the police officers that want to abuse their power accountable.
Reverend, I want to play a clip from last night's broadcast where we had Janae Bates on with us. She's with Yes from Minneapolis. She talked about the vote. Here's part of what she said.
This came out of a bunch of Black and brown folks, a bunch of young folks who are ready for their communities to be safe, both from police brutality and in community harm. And police officers just aren't able to do that right now, not with the armed police only response we have.
So, Reverend, what happens now? I mean, to TJ's point, people want reform, but they're also worried about crime, to your point as well.
Well, the tragedy in this whole debate that they have not discussed what we've already been doing with the police and the reform that's taking place under Chief Arundel now. There are several things that have taken place since George Floyd that is brand new. Number one, at the time that Chauvin and everyone was this was brought to light, the chief fired them that same day. It has never, ever happened at all. And the union didn't move for them. The community has won a plethora of things. And many of the people like Janae Bates, they're sore losers. And so rather than to look at the gains that have been made, they discounted all of that. We've had a great working relationship with Chief Arundel and Charlie Adams in the 4th precinct where most of the crime happened. So they're not telling an accurate story. Matter of fact, Janae just got here a few years ago.
All right, TJ, despite that, there is another dynamic at play here that's unavoidable, and I'd like to get the Reverend on it as well. But TJ, let's start with you. 30% of Minneapolis officers have left over the past year. Crime is up. How do you get more officers on the street? I mean, as we know, it's not easy, and people aren't exactly, clamoring to sign up to do this right now.
Well, again, I think this is going to be a problem in not just Minneapolis, but in cities across America. We're seeing this, and it's because politicians have taken a side in a lot of cities where they're echoing some of these words that they think are popular right now. And it really is, quite frankly, just dogging the profession and putting a blanket over the entire profession, when, again, I don't know if that really is what the feel is across the communities. We have to, again, really talk up the profession and bring in the people that we need to represent the community the right way. I think most people, again, want police, and they want police to do the job the right and honorable way, but we certainly cannot trash the profession and think that we're going to have a generation of law enforcement officers or people that want to become law enforcement officers when you don't have representatives who want to support you.
Reverend, quickly, we just have a few seconds left. What happens moving forward?
We go forward. We continue to help patrol our own community in concert with the police, and we continue to try to recruit good police officers and work with Rhonda with what we have.
All right. New Salem Missionary Baptist Church Reverend Jerry McAfee and retired Anne Arundel, Maryland County Police Commander TJ Smith. Great to have you both. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Be blessed.
Shifting gears now to another election in New York City, where Eric Adams has declared victory in the mayoral race. Adams is a former police captain, expected to improve the relationship between the mayor's office and the NYPD, especially amid tensions over the vaccine mandate for municipal workers. Joining me now from New York is 1010 Wins news anchor Lee Harris. Lee, it's great to see you again. So New Yorkers have had 8 years with Mayor de Blasio. What's the word on the streets there this morning as a result of what happened last night?
Well, it was not exactly a surprise outcome. If there was any surprise at all, it was that Curtis Sliwa was able to get maybe 22% of the vote. But ordinarily, if you were the Democrat running in New York, that is as good as winning the election. And this election was about crime and the situations on the street in the city. So we had two candidates who were effectively pro-police and one who was a former cop, and that gave him an enormous amount of credibility.
Right. I want to ask you, Lee, about what he said today, Eric Adams, about the vaccine mandate, saying he would reassess, but didn't really make any promises, I guess, about making any changes until he gets into office. But it sounds like he at least wants to meet with officers and the unions. How pressing is that issue there right now?
Well, we don't know how short we are in terms of cops and firefighters. We do hear one thing from the mayor, which is that it's really not having any impact, and then we get reports from the field that we may be having impact. It's admitted by City Hall that we have at least 12,000 city workers in various departments who are out on medical leave, which is sort of a way of working around the not getting paid issue for not being vaccinated. Right. So there hasn't been, massive evidence of shortages, at least not on the streets, but we are hearing from the police and fire unions that this is having an impact.
We had a retired NYPD detective with us, an officer who talked about the vaccine mandate and said, in his opinion, it was really more about trust. Let's play a clip of that for you, Lee, and get your comment after.
The relationship with this administration, with the police department, is probably the worst that I've ever seen. And so, that's one of the reasons. Maybe if the presentation of this vaccine, they were educated better, maybe more people would have been willing to take it.
So can Adams turn this around, Lee, and what will he do to try to improve the relationship between the NYPD and City Hall?
It's obvious that he has more goodwill at this point than Mayor de Blasio has. The mayor has little to none. So it is conceivable that it is possible, at least, that Adams might be more persuasive on this issue. How strongly he feels about it is not entirely clear. He has said that he is in favor of the mandates, but whether he's willing to go to war over them is another matter.
Yeah. All right, 1010 wins news anchor Lee Harris. It's always good to have you, my friend. Take care. We have some breaking news now. According to the Associated Press, Governor Phil Murphy has won re-election in New Jersey. The Democratic incumbent beat out Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli in a race that was too close to call for nearly a day now. The win by Murphy comes one day after Republican Glenn Youngkin beat former Governor Terry McAuliffe in Virginia. But again, the late word tonight, this race in New Jersey has now been called by AP for the incumbent, Governor Phil Murphy. Back to New York now. Billboards in Times Square are advertising for jobs in Spokane. Yeah, Spokane, Washington. What's up with that? But next, Aaron Rodgers tests positive for COVID, and there are real questions about how he went about telling people about his vaccination status. We'll talk with retired NFL star Tank Johnson. Tank's with us next. Trial for Kyle Rittenhouse underway in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He's accused of shooting 3 men, killing 2 during police reform protests and riots last summer. Joining me now for more from Kenosha, NewsNation's Kelly Beeson. Kelly, what's the latest from today?
Well, today, Joe, there were a couple of people who took the stand. One, a Kenosha police detective and a social media influencer. Now, today, the prosecution showed clips of video from the evening that Kyle Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 men and then injured a third. The prosecution portraying Kyle Rittenhouse as an instigator of this violence, which undercuts his claims that he was merely acting in self-defense that night.
Kelly, I'm curious. There's been a lot of talk about how he got the gun that night, and he was only 17 at the time of this incident, and we did learn a bit more about that in the testimony yesterday.
Yes, you're right, Joe. It was Kyle Rittenhouse's friend, Dominic Black, who took the stand yesterday. Now, when he took the stand, he did admit that he bought that rifle for Rittenhouse because Rittenhouse was too young to do so. And he also detailed how Kyle Rittenhouse was feeling after those shootings. Here's what he had to say.
He was freaking out. He was really scared. He was pale, sweating a lot. You could tell he was just scared.
Did he say anything?
He wasn't really talking. He just said he had to do it. It was self-defense. People were trying to hurt him.
Now, this case is centered around whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse acted in self-defense. He now faces a mandatory life sentence if convicted of the most serious count against him, which is first-degree intentional homicide. Joe.
Right. Kelly, thank you very much for the update live tonight in Kenosha. Now this. So maybe it turns out the Packers should have double-checked the vaccine card. NFL MVP Aaron Rodgers is out for the next 10 days after testing positive for COVID-19. The NFL star not vaccinated, despite telling reporters over the summer that he is immunized.
Are you vaccinated, and what's your stance on vaccinations?
Yeah, I've been immunized.
All right, so that's what he said at the time. We're joined now by retired Bear Tank Johnson. And Tank, I can't help but think maybe you're wishing this happened a couple of weeks ago before the Bears played the Packers in that game where he said, "I own you."
I tell you what, we sure could have used that protocol during that time. But, yeah, it's a strange time.
It doesn't look good for Rodgers, Tank. I mean, to say, yeah, I've been immunized, and now he has to fess up to it, I guess. I mean, I think everyone probably, maybe respects the fact that he didn't want to say anything about it, but don't lie, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think it went from kind of protecting yourself and kind of having a little bit of privacy to something a little bit more serious, where he maybe was trying to dodge the protocols. And as you know, unvaccinated players, they have a completely different walk than vaccinated players in the National Football League. So it looks like he was attempting to kind of use his celebrity status to kind of, get through, and it came back to bite him.
Do you think the team knew he wasn't vaccinated, or do you think the players knew, or do you think the players cared?
I don't think the players care, but I think the team knew. The team knows everyone's status. Listen, this is one of those things where when those players walk through the door, they know everything that's going on with them, especially as it pertains to COVID. And so they had to have known that he was not protected versus the new policy that the NFL has, and that somewhere along the season that could really rear its ugly head. And now that it's reared its ugly head, now I think that's the best thing is not happening during the playoffs. So I think going forward, he may have to just go ahead and get vaccinated, so this is not a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, Tank, and maybe it is a little bit apples and oranges here because the NFL games are outside, but, Kyrie Irving won't get the shot, and he's not playing. What's the difference, in your opinion?
Well, I think the difference is the two unions. You got the NFL union where we're not as strong as the NBA, and what happens is we tend to cave to the pressure. Where in the NBA, those guys are they're almost like their own corporation, and so they get to kind of make a little bit more individual decisions. And, that's just the nature of the beast with the NFL and the NBA.
Are the players you've talked to, Tank, okay with the NFL protocol here? Because when it came out, it was sort of eyebrow raising, where if a team had to forfeit a game because of a COVID outbreak among the unvaccinated, they would not only lose the game, but neither team would be paid for it.
Right. Listen, going into the season, I think there was a lot of players who were worried about the potential ramifications of this new vaccine mandate. The NFL, from the NFL's perspective, I know that they wish that this had not happened to one of their marquee players, the MVP, Aaron Rodgers. That makes this thing all the more polarizing. And I think you're going to start to hear more players voice their opinions that, hey, listen, this new vaccine mandate, it's not working for everybody. And with Aaron Rodgers kind of being the guy who's going to have to carry that flag, I think that's going to do the players some good.
How do you think this goes over in the locker room, Tank?
Listen, those guys are going to be frustrated. Listen, because I know that guys who were not always on board to get the vaccines got it anyway because of the team. And so to find out that your quarterback, maybe kind of pulled a fast one on you, there's going to be some guys who are going to be looking at A-Rod and giving him the side eye, and maybe some of those discount double checks, are going to go behind the woodshed.
All right. Well, I mean, this is why the league doesn't want to see this kind of thing happen, because the Packers were set to square off with Kansas City in a marquee game. Listen, Tank, I'm an Oregon Duck fan, but I respect the representation there of the Washington Huskies. So I'll give you a go Dogs on the way out.
Thank you, and go Dogs.
All right. Take care, Tank. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Help wanted billboards in Times Square for jobs in Spokane. That story coming up. And don't forget to follow us on social media at the Donlon Report on Twitter. We're back now with an update on the breaking news we told you about a little bit earlier in the broadcast here. According to the Associated Press, Governor Phil Murphy has won re-election in New Jersey. The Democratic incumbent beating out the Republican challenger, Jack Ciattarelli. This race was very close. In fact, too close to call. Obviously, we're talking about it a day after the election. But the win for Murphy comes one day after Republican Glenn Youngkin beat former Governor Terry McAuliffe in Virginia. So there's a call on that race now, that late development tonight in New Jersey. Here's a legitimate question these days. Is college worth it? The cost anyway, the cost of it. And if you're like me, having put 3 through, you probably ask yourself that question a lot, especially before they head off. But these numbers may give you at least some kind of an answer. According to Georgetown University, the cost of college is up 169% since 1980, certainly a lot. And while the cost of tuition and room and board has also ballooned, pay for young workers has gone up just 19% over the same period. So is college worth it? And we bring in a special message from an NFL star promoting mental health awareness on game days. Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott wrote, "Ask for help" on his wristband, a message for people everywhere who are struggling with their mental health. Prescott's younger brother died from suicide last April.
Though nothing can ever bring him back, he'll never be forgotten. And I've made a promise that one life taken to save millions.
Certainly an important and powerful message from the Cowboys quarterback. Here's hoping he gets back on the field soon, by the way. Tonight's American Snapshot now, the lengths and distance some managers will go to hire good workers. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office in Washington State, for example, recruiting in New York, Times Square to be specific. Although they misspelled Washington there, they're looking for 40 officers and offering a $15,000 signing bonus. They're also targeting police in Portland, Seattle, and Denver, all cities that have seen protests over police and a lot of retirements and resignations as well. Help wanted from sea to shining sea. That is our American Snapshot tonight. And that is our time for the Donlon Report tonight. We appreciate you being with us. Leland is next with On Balance. Have a great night. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.